All right. Happy upcoming Veterans Day, depending on when you see this video. It's Jerome Hanson with Hanson Realty, and we've got Zach Tarbett from Tarbett Mortgage Team. Um, Definitely just want to say happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. We know it's upcoming, but we're recording this and then we'll push it out probably on the day of or a little before, or when you see it, it could be after. Who cares, right? But in this one, we want to talk just a little bit about some of the benefits of home ownership if you are active duty or you're a veteran. And they are quite a few. I'm sure as we start, kind of running down the list, some things might pop up that we want to dig into. So why don't we start off like this, though? Why don't we start off by, since me and you are both veterans, right? Zach, why don't you tell them how you got your first property, and then we can move from there.
Yeah. So I got my first property really at my first duty station. I was first stationed in
That's the
here.
way to do it.
Yeah,
That's what everybody wishes they could have done.
yeah, and I got a lot of shit for buying a house. I was an E4. I knew I was going to be leaving to Germany, so I knew I was on orders already. But the way that I viewed it here locally in our economy was, hey, we have 5 military bases outside in Colorado Springs. Um, it didn't really show any signs that the economy was going to slow down and hurt our housing market. There was a lot of things moving here at the time, and this was 2016. So, you know,
2016. So I didn't, dude, I didn't even realize that. I didn't realize that. So you're about to tell me that the first property you owned is here
yep,
in the Springs? I did not know that about you.
yeah.
Okay.
So I did not listen to any of my NCOs because they all told me I was stupid, shouldn't buy the house, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, I mean, there's 5 bases here. I want to come back here, whether I do my 20 years or I get out. So yeah, I bought my first house as an E4 here in Colorado Springs, right outside of Fort Carson.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. There was a point in time in my career where had I been your NCO, like if I was your squad leader or your platoon sergeant, I would have been like, "What house? what is this dude talking about?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the mentality. You do too, because you
Yeah.
experienced it.
It's,
Wow.
I shouldn't have done it. What am I going to do with the house? A lot of things like that. So my first experience of buying a home with my VA loan while I was in, because the difference in monthly payment for me buying versus what my rent was $200 increase. So I was like, okay, if I could spend $200 more a month, I can have a house versus paying somebody else's rent or mortgage, excuse me. So at the time, it was pretty much a no brainer for me. Okay, if I wanted to move or do anything, I'd be spending more in rent anyway. So why not just buy a house? You know, the property taxes and homeowners insurance could go up, but the principal and interest is locked in and not going to change. So for me, buying this house in 2016 with the mortgage payment, and I still own it now to this day. Um,
Nice.
you know, if you look at what our average home prices have done, I bought this house for a little over 200,000, and the house right next door to me just sold for 425,000.
Yeah.
So, as I like to joke, it's the best stupid thing I ever did. It's where my stubbornness paid off, not listening to my leadership. But I also kind of looked at it from this point of view. I think this is often overlooked with a lot of things in the military, is that everyone that told me not to buy a house didn't own a house. They never bought a house with their VA loan. So I was like, well, you guys just live on post, or you rent an apartment, or you do live in however they want to, not using their VA loan. I was like, it's 0% down. It's lower than me buying a new house, or lower than anything else out there really to buy this place. So it made sense to me to put my BH to use. Another thing that people often don't talk about is, if you're single, obviously you're living in the barracks, unless you're like an E6 or you're somewhere where they do give you BAH. But if you're married, or you're dual military family, whatever the case may be, is you're getting money to live somewhere unless you're living on post. Then you're giving it to on post housing. So why
Yep.
not take that BAH that you're getting, whatever amount it is, and put it towards somewhere where, one, you're going to have to live, and two, you can gain equity and appreciation through. What I think is often overlooked in our community is it's not a get rich quick scheme, home ownership, right? A lot of
Exactly.
people are looking for that fast dollar. But if you can have that honest conversation with somebody of like, hey, if you bought a house at each duty station you PCS to, if it made sense, right? We're not talking Irwin,
Yep.
Drum, Polk, things like that. Duty
Yep.
stations that make sense, Lewis, Benning, Bragg, Liberty, whatever you want to call it, those big duty stations that are not going anywhere, where people have a big retirement community. Using your BH to buy your home, leveraging your VA loan is the best thing ever, because you need somewhere to live. It's going to make you money, right?
Yep.
Where you hear a lot of horror stories on is if people bought a house and they try to sell it within 6 months, 12 months. You really want to own a house, typically, at least I would say about 3 to 5 years before selling it.
Yeah. And that is, I definitely want to second that notion, man, is that this is not get rich quick. Um, those things that you see online most of the times where somebody is promising you that they will make you the greatest investor of all time by doing all types of flips all the time. And then, that's just going to blossom into, you being a multi-billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not going to be the case. It takes a certain type of personality. If you have a family, imagine what that does to your family. Imagine what it does to just the way that you think. You've got to be a certain dedicated, driven type of person. What we are doing is basically just saying, look, we're just two regular dudes that's doing regular stuff. And we had the regular old VA loan. You know what I mean? In my case is a little bit more opposite than yours, man. Mine is, my first duty station was Germany. So
Mm-hmm.
the farthest thing from my mind was, purchasing a house. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I stayed there. I was in Germany for a long time, man. I wanted, yeah, upwards of 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got back, got deployed. So even when I got back to the States, because I hit the ground thinking about being deployed, I still wasn't thinking, hey, let's get a house.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until my duty station in Arizona, when we were coming back from my second time in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
then we were like, by this time I had a family, kid, everything,
Yeah.
so I was late to the ball game, but at this point is when I was like, okay, we got to get a house, but once I used that VA loan, discovered what it was like to have a 0% down, and then like the lowest mortgage rate offered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized what that was like, and I saw how having a good realtor and having a good, because it was in Sierra Vista that I bought, also a kind of a military town there, right? So the realtor and the lender were very cognizant of the fact that, hey, this is a military guy. We understand everything. We understand the steps. Um, so once I went through that and I saw the process, it was like, oh, okay, I've been missing out, right?
Yep.
So right then and there, we did that in 2014. I want to say the next year, I bought another property in the same area,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now the flip had switched in my head, and I was like, oh man, I've been missing out on real estate this whole time. So all of a sudden, I became an investor,
Yeah.
right? And I was just buying up properties any way I could. Um, and we ended up with a decent sized portfolio of properties,
Mm-hmm.
um, all which have done us well. I don't still have all of them,
Mm-hmm.
um, which, by the way, is something that everybody needs to think about if they plan on going the whole investor route. You do need to think about long term. What's your long term goal? Are you planning on holding them? Are you planning on waiting until they get to a certain return on investment so that then you can sell them and do other things or what have you? Right. But for my circumstances, I ended up, selling quite a few. I still have a couple down there in Arizona. But now that I'm here in the Springs, you know, obviously I wanted to buy a house here, which we did,
Hmm.
so that is kind of where my mentality is now. The mentality is I'll never be trying to rent unless, I have to do something for short term,
Hmm.
you know, but I'm never going to be trying to just rent long term. And like you said, pay somebody else's mortgage,
Hmm.
right? Because once that flip has switched, there's no way you can go back, man.
Yeah.
You just can't. All right.
So one thing I want to ask you, how long were
Yeah.
you in before you used your VA loan? 7 years in Germany, came back stateside deployed. It sounds like
Yeah.
you were in for almost like 9, 10 years
Yeah, man.
first.
I was. So what was that? 2000. So it was 2014 when I bought my first property, and I joined the military in 2001, bro. Like
Woo!
after 9/11. Yeah. So that's the way I felt. Like it hit me that hard. I was like, man, 13 years I've been doing this.
Hmm.
No home. No, you know what I mean? Like, and once the flip switched, it was just like, man, I've been doing myself wrong. I've been doing my family wrong, you
Hmm.
know? And here's something that really hit home for me, right? I remember back when I was going through language school, there was, I had this friend, he was me and him, same rank and everything. He was a PFC, I was a PFC, and he had this brilliant idea. He was going to save up all his cash. He was from New York. He was going to save up all his cash, send it to his mom, and the both of them were going to go in and buy a house.
Hmm.
PFC, right? And he was living in the barracks, obviously. He was getting meal subsistence, obviously,
Hmm.
right? So he, in his mind, he figured, well, I don't need that money. All that stuff can go to the house,
Hmm.
right? That would have been 2002, right? So he bought that house with his mom in 2002 when he was a PFC nothing,
Hmm.
right? Um, think about that, right? Think about that. I haven't kept in touch with him, but now that my switch flipped, right?
Hmm.
Now I know, oh man, that dude was brilliant.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that guy was brilliant, So it's things like that that I really want to push out there to our community to let them know it's never too early to actually start thinking about this stuff. It
Yeah.
just isn't.
Hmm. Yeah. And some of the things that I think people don't realize, like when it comes to your VA loan, um, if you're National Guard, there are some more requirements that you need to meet before you can use your VA loan compared to active duty, right? Once you're active, you just need to complete 90 days continuous service. Pretty easy to do, right? By the time you hit your
Yeah.
first duty station, you're pretty much right there. For the guardsmen, reserves, you guys have a little bit different of a requirement. Either you need to do 6 good years, so you got to have all your points and everything, or if you've been activated under Title 10 or Title 32 for 30 continuous days with a total of 90 days served, then you're eligible for your VA loan as well. So this is where I see a lot of guardsmen get hemmed up. They get pre-approved, but somebody doesn't check their certificate of eligibility. Quite frankly, when you're in the guard or reserves, we typically have to manually request your certificate of eligibility for you. It doesn't automatically populate like a lot of active duty guys do. And what we need for that, depending if you're out or in, we'll need your NGB 22 or 23 if you're in the guard, some kind of statement of service from your commander, just showing that you met those requirements. Typically, your orders too, if you've been activated under Title 10 or Title 32, we need a copy of those to show that you met that 90-day requirement, right? It doesn't need to be 90 days continuous. It could be broken up, but you do have to have 30 days continuous, 90 days accumulative for guard or reserve members. So a little bit different requirements, but not the end of the world.
Yeah.
I'd say if you're a guardsman or reservist, just and you don't have any deployments lined up, make sure you're doing your good years. You're showing up to drill. You're showing up to your AT. You're doing the things that you need to do to get those points, because I've seen it where guys hit 6 years and gals, excuse me, hit 6 years, but they were not going to their drill. They were not collecting their points, which you do through your annual, your monthly training, your summer training. And then they do 6 years. They get done with their commitment to the reserve or guard, and they still can't use their VA loan because they didn't meet the points requirement. So
Yeah.
there's a few different things you want to make sure of if this is you. And the big thing is making sure you get your certificate of eligibility up front. Active duty guys and gals, super, super easy, right? You just need to hit 90 days time in service. I mean, by the time you're done with any training, you're pretty much already there. By the time you hit your unit, you're pretty much met that requirement compared to reserves and guardmen, just a different set of rules.
Yeah. And you know what? One of the other things that I've found that holds people back, and to you and I, it might sound strange, but I've definitely heard quite a bit of people thinking that the capital gains tax is going to destroy them because, oh, we move so much, we're PCS. So if I buy a house and I PCS and I have to sell it, and oh my goodness, the capital gains tax is going to take me out.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to let people know that that is not the case, right? If you are living in that residence, if you're using that home as your personal residence, the capital gains tax is actually non-existent up to, if you're single, it's what, $250,000 worth of profit. And if you're married, I believe it's $500,000 worth of profit, meaning you could make 500 grand worth of profit and it won't be taxed. Check me on that number though, but I believe that is the case.
I believe so too.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So anybody out there that's thinking to themselves, oh, you know what, even if I make profit, then, the man is going to come and take my money or whatnot. That is not how this works if you're not currently investing now. If it's an investment, that's a whole nother story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yes, there is capital gains tax, and it's going to be all dependent on how much you made and how much you make overall and all that. But if it's your residence, you're probably going to be scot free on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely want to make sure everybody understands that. And then another great benefit that a lot of people don't realize, and you're going to be more clear on all the states. Well, not all of them, but at least I know for certain you know some of them more than I do. However, what about the property tax? Tell them
Mm-hmm.
about the property tax.
Yeah, so there's about 20 states total where there is no property tax if you're 100% permanent and total disabled through the VA. So big ones are going to be Texas, Florida, Alabama, Michigan. There's quite a few, but those are just the ones that I can think of off the top of the
Yeah.
head. But there's about a total of 20 states. I'll be sure to publish all of them later in another video. But if you're 100% permanent and total and you're not getting this property tax exemption, or if you know you're going to get out and probably get 100, this could really dictate on where you end up. So, as we know, Texas is super military friendly state.
Yep.
Um, they are one of the ones that have a really good property tax exemption for 100%. Other states though, like our home state of Colorado, not super super great. I did see something on the ballot where they may be looking to amend it. I just didn't look
They
too
are.
far into that.
Yeah.
Georgia is also not the best either, kind of similar to Colorado. It's like 50% off. I think the exact same 200,000 first assessed, like the
And
assessed
is
value.
it 200 or 250? I have to check that,
I'll
but I
have to
think you're
double
right. It
check.
might be 200.
Yeah, it was either 200. It may have gone up to 250, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are disabled veteran, this is something that could be a huge benefit for you. Typically, I'll say most states though, you want to be 100% to get any kind of real incentive, even in states like Colorado and Georgia, where it's not a huge benefit. Being 100% gives you that 50% off your first like $200,000 in assessed value. But big states like Florida, Texas, those are pretty high property tax states. So if you have that
Yes.
100% exemption, you can really, really factor that into making your monthly payment more affordable. I had a gentleman, his property tax alone would have been over $1,000 a month. He got his 100% rating throughout the process, and we were able to waive his property tax up front before they even closed on the house. So
Wow.
some
Nice.
states, Texas is really the only one that I've been able to do it in, is where if you have 100%, I can have your property taxes waived up front, which is phenomenal. Some other states like Alabama, they do want you to close and then file your homestead exemption. So be sure that, keep in mind, depending where you're buying at, if you are 100% and you have that exemption in your state, some will not allow you to do it until after closing. But states like Texas, I know for sure will allow you to do it before closing.
Nice. All right. So I think we're covering some of the really good benefits here. I mean, what about just, besides the whole money aspect? to be honest, there is also a factor in this where there's just a sense of ownership, and it's
Mhm.
just different. You know what I mean? We Most of us have heard, that renters will treat a property a little bit different than the
Mhm.
actual owners of the property will. I've definitely experienced that. I have rented before, and I've also experienced it as a landlord,
Mhm.
right? So I can see the difference. And it's not to say that everyone does this, but there is a little bit of a difference. There's a pride of ownership that comes with the property, knowing that every month, every year, as an owner, you're actually building up equity. It's some people call it a forced savings account,
Mhm.
which, you know what, if you look the trend of real estate throughout history, that is exactly what it is. It is a
Yeah.
forced savings account. It is not something that is immediately liquid, so that just on the spur of a moment you can just take it out and go buy yourself some sort of stupid, car or something like that. You know what I
Yep.
mean? That is a benefit. I consider that to be a benefit, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I mean, you know, the big thing, especially if you're active duty, you're getting money to live somewhere. So you might as well put that money to use somehow. Obviously there's some high cost living areas where BH doesn't meet the cost of owning a home if you're a single family income household, excuse me. But I mean, it's kind of a way to, if you're looking at it from the active duty perspective, my goal was to have one house at each good duty station I was at for my career. Out of the three duty stations I was at, I bought a house in two because one of them was Germany. Can't buy a house in Germany, right? So it's just how are you going to invest in yourself? Because, a lot of people, like you said, the forced savings plan, a lot of people don't invest into their TSP, especially if you're a
Yeah.
newer generation soldier. You have to invest in your TSP, right? It's something that's kind of rolled out versus the legacy system where you got like 50%, blah, 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 blah. So if you're not investing in these kind of things, the military is giving you your TSP, or maybe you have your own kind of 401k Roth somewhere. Buying the home is going to help you build up that equity. So when it
Yeah.
does come time to retire, right? Whether you do one contract of 3 or 4 years or you do 20 years, owning that home over time is going to appreciate. It's going to bring you value. It's going to help you out a lot more. And my whole plan before was to do my 20 years, retire, and have at least five homes, right? The way that I did my numbers, depending how long I owned each home for, if I had five homes, I'd probably be worth $1 million in equity with all those homes put together. So I'd be
Yeah.
worth a nice chunk of change. Because as
Yeah.
we know, the pension, I may have been able to retire as an E7. It's not super, super great. It's not super bad, but you're not making, I think a lot of people think you're going to retire and be rolling in the dough. It's not really the case. You still have to have another
Nope.
source of income when you retire from the military. And
Yep.
I think that's often not talked about and overlooked.
Yeah. And I can vouch for that as somebody who did retire, right? So I kind of, structured things a little bit different, obviously. For me, I actually started thinking really financially in stocks, right? So I was playing in stocks and stuff, not playing, but I was holding stocks, and then I was able to kind of move some of that over into real estate, and obviously the VA loan helped me do that, right? And, as I said before earlier on in my story, I started acquiring some properties. That equity that we've been talking about was then used to roll into some other investments, more stocks, crypto, stuff like that. So,
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say is that we need to start looking at this as more than just, okay, well, this is just a home and I live in it. And, yes, on one level, it is just a home and you live in it and you should take care of it. And at first, you do need to think about it like that. But then there's a separate box that you also need to keep in the back of your mind that, yes, when the government comes after you for taxes and stuff, they're not looking at it as just your home. This is an investment,
Mhm.
right? They're looking at it as you're making equity, right? When you sell it, somehow or the other, we're going to try to figure out a way to pull some taxes out, either the county or the state or federal. They're going to figure out how to get some money from you in these homes, right? If it's the residents, then they give you a little 250K off. They're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, you're okay up to that. But if you make some more, we want our cut. So you need to start thinking about it like that as well, right? So if you get to the point where you're owning multiple homes, then you need to think, okay, is it worth it for me to just sit back and own these homes? Or is it also something where I can take equity out or sell the properties, whatever, and then move into other types of investment as a springboard that I'm, really interested in, or I want to diversify or whatever. So the way I look at it is a whole gamut of, personal investment for me, right?
Mhm.
And it all started really with that VA loan purchase that I made in 2014 is when I really, really started thinking like, oh man, I've been missing out,
Yeah.
So I'm glad we were able to have this chat. Anything else you want to add on to this?
Nope. Just if you have questions on how to use your VA loan and how to stack up properties through whether you're in or out, I mean, it's never too late to learn how to leverage your VA loan. I think it's one of the best. I mean, honestly, quite frankly, the best tool that we were given through our service.
Yeah,
And don't be pushed towards a different loan program. Don't be told you shouldn't use your VA loan. There's a lot of bad information from people that just don't know how the program works. So definitely get with somebody who knows what they're talking about, how the system works, the program works, and how to leverage it to the best of your ability, because it's something that not everybody has and not everybody knows how to use.
awesome. Yep, I second that. So I think that was it for this episode of We'll Name This Later. Once again, happy Veterans Day. Jerome Hanson, Hanson Realty, Zach Tarbert with Tarbert Mortgage Team. We'll catch you next time.